Hi, my name is Barb Nangle. I'm the founder of Higher Power Coaching and Consulting. I want to welcome you to my podcast, Fragmented to Whole, Life Lessons from 12-Step Recovery. This is episode 20, Humility. I want to begin by differentiating humiliation from humility. It seems to me that a lot of people in recovery confuse these two concepts. Humiliation is where you feel really ashamed or embarrassed, maybe even mortified. In my opinion, it's probably the worst human feeling that there is. It's closely related to shame, but I think of shame as something private and humiliation as something that's public, where you feel like you've been made a fool publicly. So it just magnifies any shame that is felt. This is not what we're talking about when we talk about humility. Humility is knowing that you are no better and no worse than anyone else. Humility is how we are when we are aligned with our higher power. If you're turning your will and your life over to your higher power, you are being humble. That is humility. When we have humility, we know that we're neither above or below the rest of the human race. We are part of the human race. We acknowledge our shortcomings and we become willing to ask for help. Some people equate feeling less than others with humility. It's not. Genuine humility brings an end to feelings of inadequacy, self-absorption, and status seeking. Before recovery, I tended to think of humility as something that people who were arrogant, like me, need to learn to practice. And that is true. What I've come to understand also in recovery is that people who think they're the worst pieces of shit that ever walked the face of the planet also need to practice humility. If you think you're better than everyone, or if you think you're worse than everyone, that means you are extremely self-centered. Think about it. If you are always looking for evidence about how you're better than other people, you're smarter than other people, your way is the right way, it means you're extremely self-centered. That is, you are at the center of your thinking. Well, the opposite is also true. If you are always thinking, nobody has it as bad as me, I'm worse than everybody else, I don't deserve to take up space, everybody's looking at me, everybody's going to think I'm dumb, then you are also extremely self-centered. It means you are at the center of your thinking. The way to get past this is to really listen to other people in the rooms of recovery. This helps me to understand that I'm no different from my fellows. I remember the first time I heard the phrase terminally unique. I was in my first couple of months in recovery, and the person was saying that when they came into recovery, they thought they were terminally unique. They were uniquely flawed, meaning that nobody had it as bad as them. Nobody could possibly understand how awful their life was or what a piece of shit they were. And they came to understand that we're all just bozos on the bus. In other words, nobody's better and nobody's worse than anybody. That's humility, knowing that you're no better and no worse than anyone. The other expression I heard pretty early on in recovery that helped me a lot was don't compare your insides to other people's outsides. That is, you're only looking at people's highlight reel. You're not really looking at what's going on inside of them. This is especially true when you first come into recovery and you compare yourself to people who've been around a long time and have a lot more recovery under their belt than you do. It can also be true if you compare the pace of your recovery to that of those around you. If you are diligent about doing the work of recovery, then you will recover. You will change too. In the end, it doesn't really matter how long it takes as long as you recover. This is like a child learning to walk. Some parents get upset when other kids are walking before their kid. It doesn't mean anything. The kid is eventually going to learn to walk. By the time they're 5, you're not even thinking about how long it took them to learn how to walk. Now, just to be clear, when I say being diligent about the work of recovery, I don't just mean going to meetings. I mean going to meetings, getting a sponsor, working the steps, using the tools of your particular fellowship, reading recovery literature, coming out of isolation, reaching out to others, providing service in your recovery community, and especially connecting with a higher power and using that higher power to guide your life. Not necessarily in that order. Recovery is not just meeting attendance. Don't get me wrong, meetings are extremely important, but they're not the whole thing. Now, back to the comparison thing. Think about Facebook. People post the highlights of their lives, but we act like it's their whole life, not just the highlight reel. If you think about it, there are people who their life is a complete mess, but they're not showing that on Facebook. They're only showing the good stuff, which makes sense, of course. So don't compare your insides to other people's outsides. Don't compare your home movies to someone else's highlight reel. I want to relate a story from my past about a friend I used to compare myself to all the time. I met her through work and we eventually became pretty close friends. This woman was incredibly beautiful, really smart, a fantastic worker, a great trainer. She seemed to be good, really good at everything she did. And on top of that, she could sing like a nightingale. She was extremely talented, both as an actress and a singer. She'd married her high school sweetheart, was in a long-term happy marriage, had 2 children, and a wonderful life. I'm almost 10 years older than her. And I was like, oh my God, she's amazing. How did she get all this stuff at such a young age? And I would constantly compare myself to her, especially physically, because I was obese at the time. And I would think, how did she get that life? How did she manage that? She's so lucky. She must be so happy. But once I got to know her, I found out that she had eczema and was super focused on her skin. She would obsess about what her skin looked like. She was always worried that people were looking at her skin. And once I got to know her and understand how much this affected her, I was astonished. Here I was thinking how beautiful she was, how fantastic her life was. Yet she was so focused on her skin. She was often more focused on that and whether people would see it than she was on appreciating the wonderful aspects of her life. And here I'd been comparing my insides to her outsides. Meanwhile, I never even knew she had eczema until she told me. And it's not like she was wearing long pants and long sleeves all the time either. My point in telling you this is that everybody has something that they struggle with. It doesn't matter how well somebody appears to be doing. There's nobody, absolutely nobody on the earth that doesn't have some kind of demon. Everybody's got something going on internally that they're struggling with. The best way to get past this self-centeredness is to stop comparing yourself to other people and compare yourself to former you. I was fortunate enough to learn this a really long time ago. I don't even know where I learned it, but I learned to compare me to former me, not other people, because I can always find someone who has it better than me. And we're supposed to be learning to keep the focus on ourselves in recovery. So stop comparing yourself to others. That being said, I think there is an exception to this rule. And that is when things are going terribly wrong. It helps to think of someone who has it much worse than you. I know that for me, when I was in the depths of my depression or I was feeling extreme grief or really sorry for myself, I found that I could always find people who had it worse off than me. And I would remember to think, there, but for the grace of God, go I. I saw a comedian one time who expressed this sentiment very well. He said he was flipping through the channels on television and he came across a guy who had no arms and he was playing the guitar with his feet. And the comedian said, "Oh my God, I suck. I have hands and I can't even play the fucking guitar." He realized that no matter what the circumstances, you can always find a way to make things happen. There's always someone who has it worse than you. If the dude with no hands can play the guitar with his fucking feet, then you can find a way to do whatever it is you want to do. I believe it was Franklin Delano Roosevelt who said, "Do what you can with what you have where you are." In other words, stop lamenting what you don't have, that you weren't born with a silver spoon in your mouth, that you don't have an affliction, that you have an affliction that other people don't have, or that you don't live in the hip town, or you live too far from the right place, and start appreciating what you do have. Perhaps listen to my podcast on gratitude, which is episode number 11. And remember, humility means you are no better and no worse than anyone else. Namaste. That's it for today. If you like what you've heard here, then you just might be interested in private coaching with me. If that sounds like you, head on over to my website, which is higherpowercoachingandconsulting.com, and click on the contact menu. I'd be happy to schedule a consultation with you to help you make lasting changes in your life, like I've made deep, lasting changes in my life. My ideal client is someone who is ripe for change, but I'll coach anyone who wants to be happy, joyous, and free. So if that's you, shoot me an email. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe so you can be sure to get future episodes of my podcast. Thanks again.